What's up? Welcome to the Theory Creep, and I am your Theory Creep. Recently, I've been watching a lot of powerlifting videos and strongman competitions. Maybe it's just toxic masculinity, but I find them pretty interesting. And I've been thinking about what the appeal of the powerlifter is and obviously it has a lot to do with bodies. It has a lot to do with tactile kind of experiences. What we're interested in when we watch a powerlifter is the pain that they're experiencing, the kind of tremendous pressure they're putting their body under. It's empathetic. We imagine ourselves in the same situation, or we gain some kind of pleasure out of watching them suffer. I think it's really similar to the kind of pleasure we derive from daredevils and stuntmen. And what I find interesting about both daredevils and stuntmen is the way that they're both physical and non-physical. When we watch a powerlifter perform, or a daredevil jump over a bunch of school buses or something and crash and break their leg, in both situations we're feeling something, we're watching someone go through a bodily experience, but we're doing so virtually. There's no physical connection between us and the performer, but there also is a physical connection. We feel what they're going through in a way that is quite direct. It's quite tactile, but at the same time, it's mitigated by the virtual experience of watching a computer screen or a television screen. So all this made me think of a book called The Thrill Makers by Jacob Smith. It's a historical study of daredevils that I read as I was researching The Fan Man. All this also obviously makes me think about The Fan Man, which is why it's appearing in my Fan Man series. But yeah, so The Thrill Makers is a pretty interesting book. It's a discussion of stunt people in the early turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s. And the part of the book that I'm really interested in focuses on Hollywood and the early days of Hollywood and the role of stunt people in film and in pop culture. Because in the golden days of cinema, stunt people, obviously, as they are today, were used in film to replace actors when the actor had to do something dangerous. But unlike today, the stunt people were also celebrities themselves. I guess this is still kind of true with people like Jackie Chan. But for the most part, I think stunt people are more anonymous now than they used to be. Human Flies, for example, appeared in newsreels all the time. They did live performances that were advertised in newspapers. They were often hired as promotional kind of stunt people to unveil a building. Like a human fly would climb a newly constructed skyscraper and throw the American flag on top of it or something. I don't know. So stunt people have always been kind of anonymous because, like I said, they are replacing celebrities in films, and in that replacement, they're meant to disappear. They're meant to appear as someone else, but they're also celebrities in that they are the subject of fame, right? They receive a lot of adoration and fame, and their spectacles. So Smith cites a news article early in his book that calls stunt people unheralded, unknown, and unsung. But I think Smith is quite aware of the contradiction here because he goes on to name four pretty famous stunt people. We'll throw them up here. They were all celebrities in their own right. People knew their names. They were household names. They were recognizable. They appeared in newsreels. They appeared in films of their own. They did promotional live stunts all the time. So there's this mixing of anonymity and fame in the Daredevil. And again, the Daredevil is all about the body, right? I think this is the root of their anonymity is that they're highly replaceable, right? Like a celebrity is a personality. You can't replace a personality. You get another personality. But a stuntman or a powerlifter, while they have personalities, and that's part of their appeal, they are extremely replaceable. They are basically just a body. They're a body that can climb a building. They're a body that can lift 1,000 pounds, which is obviously rare. Obviously they are not like every other body, But the fact that their fame is rooted in a bodily function, I think does make them a little bit more anonymous, a little bit more replaceable, a little bit less personal. They have less of a personality. I think of all the forms of celebrity, the daredevil is probably the closest to the anonymous masses, especially like a stunt person in a film. They have a very, specialized skill set. I'm not trying to undermine the work that stunt people do, but fundamentally, all that separates a stunt person from the average person is an acceptance of risk, a willingness to put your body at risk in order for your body to be seen. And I guess to make a little bit of money. The body of the daredevil is really sacrificed in order to be seen. It's given up for visibility. Smith calls this a suicidal drive for an audience, and I think he's being quite literal. You're putting your life at risk in order to be seen when you're a daredevil. You jump off a bridge and, you want people to watch you and you might die. So it's literally a suicidal drive to be seen. But I think there's more to this phrase than the literal reading. I think that the drive to be seen, whether you're putting your body in danger or not, is suicidal. I think in order to be seen, we have to vanish. When we step on stage, we leave something of ourselves behind. The process of celebritization, becoming famous, is a sacrificial process. There's a South Park episode, I think, that makes light of this. Hopefully we don't get copyright struck if I throw a few clips up there.
Well, nobody wants her to die, little boy. We all simply need her to. Throughout history, people have found it necessary to engage in human sacrifice. In ancient times, humans would commonly pick one lovely girl, adorn her with jewels, treat her like a goddess, and then watch her die.
We like to think we're more civilized now, but the truth is our lust for torture and death is no different than it was in gladiator times.
So let's talk a little bit more about daredevils and their role as stunt people in films. The fact that we have an actor during a dangerous scene being replaced by a stunt person, kind of through obfuscation, like we're tricked into thinking that the actor is the one doing these dangerous things, when in fact it's a different performer. This process reminds us that what we see of the actor when we watch a film is really not the actor. Like, the actor is one very small part of the character that we observe when we watch a movie, right? Like, they're the product of countless professionals like lighting grips, electricians, set designers, photographic directors, editors, post-processing people. Like, all of these trades are playing a huge role in how you absorb the essence of an actor, the essence of a character. What you think you see is the actor's face, but what you're actually seeing is this composite of, countless professionals changing lighting and doing makeup and arranging clothing and telling them what to say. There's a mass production to film. And stunt people, I think, are one of the most obvious examples of this, because while you can say that a lighting professional changes your experience of an actor because they light their faces poorly or well, or to indicate a threatening or a soft kind of nature, the stunt person literally replaces the actor. They literally come up on stage and pretend to be someone they're not. They trick us into thinking that they're another person, which is what all of cinema is. It's all about tricking us into believing that one person is actually a singular unit, when in fact they're this product of a mass process. What's appealing to us about daredevils is that their bodies are at risk. We hope for bodily harm when we watch these spectacles because it lets us deal with our fear of our own mortality, right? When we watch someone get hurt, we can relive the fear that we have constantly that we'll get hurt, but we aren't getting hurt. It's recreational for us, but it's not for them, obviously. But for us, we get to watch an injury and remain uninjured. So it helps us deal with our fear of getting injured. So we love strongmen and powerlifters and stunt people because they're just like us. Because they're just a person with a body, and sure, they put their body through tremendous risk and tremendous pain, and they usually exhibit a lot of discipline in order to get there. it's still just about their body. It's not about their personality. It's not about who they are. It's about what they have, the physical body that we all share. Now, something else that we all share is death and pain, because that's tied to the bodies that we all have, right? So when we watch someone on screen, whether it's a stunt person or a power lifter, or I think this is also true of like NASCAR races, like Formula One races, where a big part of that spectacle is hoping for a crash, right? It's hoping for this display of mortality, this display of bodily harm, because to watch someone get injured while not getting injured yourself is kind of therapeutic. It helps you deal with your fears of being injured or dying without actually having to experience any kind of pain. And that's really what these spectacles are about. It's about death. I mean, everything is really about death. What do they say?
We're all gonna die someday, Lord, we're all gonna die someday. Mama's on pills, daddy's over the hill, but we're all gonna die someday.
So the stunt person or the power lifter, they're also extremely brave, right? That's part of their appeal as well. Not only do we watch them hoping that they'll get injured so that we can kind of manage a little bit of our fear and live a little bit of what we're afraid of without actually having to hurt it. Like, we can keep it at a distance. They're also managing fear much better than we would, right? Like, for example, if you watch a rock climber like free solo up a mountain, like, you would panic and die in that situation, right? But he doesn't. So when or she doesn't. So when you watch someone doing these ridiculously dangerous, ridiculously painful things and managing it properly, we can also kind of borrow a little bit of their bravery. We can take a little bit of their strength and maybe identify with them and imagine ourselves as them. I think that's another useful part of this fantasy. So speaking of rock climbers, one brand of stunt person that Smith talks about a great deal is the human fly, which is essentially just an early rock climber, except they climbed buildings. They began their lives as laborers, roofers and construction workers who, before the days of OSHA, had to be extremely good rock climbers because they had no safety equipment. I guess they weren't rock climbers, but they had to be very good climbers. So anyway, some of these laborers turned to their skills and their, incredible comfort with heights into a career as a stunt person, as a performer. They'd be hired to raise flags on construction sites, like I said earlier. Before the days of television, live performance was obviously much more important than it is today, and they were one of the litany of live performers that operated in America in the early 1900s. So the appeal of these performances of climbing, I think, are exactly along the same lines as performances of extreme weightlifting or any other stunt, really. For Smith, this is about, and I think he's right about this, this is about the growing population of urban, white-collar office workers, right? The population was moving out of the rural environment into the urban environment. They were less and less laborers and more administrators operating in a kind of information or like mass manufacturing-based economies. So Smith says that the human flies appealed to a desire for momentousness and risk, felt by those caught up in the predictable urban routines that were growing more and more common in America. Now, it's no coincidence that the human fly is climbing a skyscraper, which was more and more becoming the setting of these urban routines. So the relationship between the human fly and the skyscraper is a complicated one. On the one hand, the skyscraper is the device or the vessel or the apparatus that the human fly uses to assert their humanity. They dominate the glass and steel surface of the skyscraper, which is profoundly inhuman, right? It's non-organic, it's giant. The scale of it makes us seem tiny. It seems like it's in another world at the top of a skyscraper. And yet there's a human fly on the outside of it, on the top of it, like just dominating it, asserting their power, asserting their ability. That's one thing that's happening between the skyscraper and the human fly. The other thing that's happening is as the fly climbs a skyscraper and they get smaller and smaller, it almost seems like they disappear. And in a way, like the same as the powerlifter or the strongman or any other stuntman, the human fly does disappear. They vanish into their performance. They lose their personality and become just a body. which is really the anxiety that the human fly's audience is mitigating as they watch the human fly's performance. They've lost their personality. They've become a cog in a machine. They live these monotonous, routine, mechanical lives, and the human fly is up there doing this dynamic, bold thing, asserting humanity over the environment that's dehumanized their audience. So this is just another example of the kind of bi-directional movement of celebritization. On the one hand, celebrities become more human. They become more real as they're viewed, as they become spectacles. But on the other hand, celebrities become less people and more things. According to Smith, the flies become toy-like as they climb the skyscrapers. They become things. Even their names are things, right? The human fly. They're a mixture, just like how a toy and a person are unrelated. Just like a body and a person have this distance between them, or the performance of a stunt person or a strongman creates this distance between the body and the self. Because all we're really seeing when we watch these performances are bodies. So just to summarize, the human fly runs in two disparate directions. On the one hand, they're made more visible and less anonymous as they assert themselves over the steel facade of a skyscraper. On the other hand, they're made toy-like and small by the massive scale of the skyscraper and the inorganic, inhuman, harsh components and materials that it's made out of. And just as the potential death of the fly helps the audience mitigate their own fears of mortality, this disappearing of the fly as they climb up the building and they kind of vanish into this massive mechanical economic environment, just like their audience has, right? Like, you're an everyday office worker in a skyscraper. You probably feel like you've disappeared into this environment. Like you just become a part of it. Like you don't matter. You're replaceable. You vanished into the skyscraper the same way that the human fly has. So maybe as we watch the human fly vanish up the skyscraper, we're mitigating our own fears about our own irrelevance to some extent. Now, I don't want you to think that we're just talking about stunt people and powerlifters. Everything that we've said about those performances applies to every performance. Every actor becomes an appearance. They become superficial as they're virtualized on camera. This is a universal process among all performances. Everyone who performs in some way becomes their body. So this should remind us of something that we mentioned in an earlier video, but it was a long and boring one, so maybe we'll just go over it again briefly. It's a quote by Walter Benjamin that's addressing this dehumanizing kind of process that actors undergo when they're filmed, on a film set. So he says, to perform in the glare of arc lamps while simultaneously meeting the demands of the microphone is a test performance of the highest order. To accomplish it is to preserve one's humanity in the face of the apparatus. Interest in this performance is widespread. For the majority of city dwellers throughout the workday in offices and factories have to relinquish their humanity in the face of this apparatus. In the evening, these same masses fill the cinemas to witness the film actor taking revenge on their behalf, not only by asserting his humanity, in parentheses, or what appears to them as such, against the apparatus, but by placing that apparatus in the service of his triumph. So what Benjamin is saying here is that the actor is doing something very complicated and kind of two-sided. On the one hand, they're preserving their humanity in the face of this dehumanizing kind of mechanistic process whereby they're reduced to their appearance and they become part of this mass process that produces this, amalgam character that the audience perceives, which is really much more than the celebrity themselves and their personality. So Benjamin is like a kind of a Marxist. He's a little bit Platonic. He's really into immediate interaction with unique artifacts. He says that everything that's like manufactured by a craftsperson has an aura, and everything that's kind of manufactured by a mass group loses that aura because there's not a single craftsperson. I think this is tied to his Marxist leanings. But again, for him, aura is authenticity. Aura is immediate and present. It's not absent the way that a film actor is. But in this passage, the one we just read, he seems to be saying something different. He seems to be saying the humanity of the celebrity is asserted by their like celluloid reconstruction, by their mass-produced aura-less appearance. And I think he undermines this reading. He brings himself back to his kind of Marxist roots with the parentheses where he says, what appears to them as such. So what's a parentheses exactly? Like what is a parenthetical clause? It's defined as a word, clause, or sentence that's inserted as an explanation or an afterthought into a passage that is grammatically complete without it. So that's the really important part of what makes a parentheses, that a sentence or thought like this paragraph is complete without the parentheses. So I'm not sure this was Benjamin's intention, but it's how I read this paragraph. And that is that you have the actor asserting their humanity, and then optionally, you can say that humanity is just an appearance as such. But if you want, you can take the appearance of the humanity to be the authentic presentation of a self. So I like this complexity. I like these two contradictory meanings being available in this paragraph at the same time, because it corresponds to the kind of dual directionality of celebrities and stuntmen and strongmen and powerlifters. All of these people, all of these performances simultaneously assert the humanity of the performer, but also rob the performer of their humanity. They move in both directions, just like Benjamin's paragraph. So those are my thoughts on, daredevils and stuntmen and strongmen and that kind of thing. Just something to think about. I'm the Theory Creep. This has been the Theory Creep. Thanks for watching.